This is Predrag Cicovacki, a professor of philosophy from the College of the Holy Cross in the United States of America, speaking to you. And the occasion for us being together through the Skype this time is the anniversary of Gandhiji's death on January 30th. And I would like to tell you first about why I became acquainted with Gandhi, what I learned from Gandhi, and why I think that Gandhi is still of enormous significance in our own time. To begin with, let me give you a brief biographical notes. I was born in a country that does not exist anymore. The name of that country was Yugoslavia. That was one of the countries that, together with India and Egypt, started a non-aligned movement. I was born and grew up at a time of peace and a time of prosperity and a time that had hope for young men and women for a better future, for a good future. And then while I was studying for my doctoral degree in the United States, a war broke out in the former Yugoslavia. And it was hard to say exactly what kind of war that was. It was a civil war. Serbs and Croats against each other, of Christians and Muslims against each other, Catholics and Orthodox against each other. And of course, as we know, in the modern world, foreigners are always involved. The European Union, America, their interest. To make a long story short, it was an enormously bloody and destructive war. And it was a war that made me and many people like myself who grew up in that peaceful country very confused. Why is it that those people who live so peacefully, who had such a prospect for a good future, why are they now fighting against each other? Why are they killing each other? Why are they hating each other? Why are they raping each other's daughters and wives and mothers? Was it all necessary? Where did it come from? Did that evil always exist in people? Was that violence part of human nature? So those were the questions that were crossing my mind, that were bothering me very, very deeply. And those were the questions to which I did not have an answer. What I studied, philosophy, my subject, my academic subject, did not prepare me to deal with these questions and answer those kind of questions. It left me unprepared. It left me confused. It left me bewildered that things like that were going on. So I went to outside of my academic discipline of philosophy, and I started looking at different sources that could help me understand, make sense of that reality, brutal, violent reality of war, of my native country that fell apart in such a violent manner. It does not exist anymore, as most of you know. I visited your university in 2008 when you organized the conference, Gandhi is Back. And then last year, I was on a Fulbright Nehru Senior Fellowship at the University of Banaras at Malviya Center for Peace Research in Banaras, in Varanasi, to study more Gandhi, to study more about the origin and the nature of violence and nonviolence. So what I have done since coming back from India is to try to write my own book about Gandhi and about the relevance of Gandhi for our time. The title of this book is Gandhi's Legacy. And I want to tell you in the next 20 or so minutes about what this book is about, how I see Gandhi, and where do I see the lasting influence and relevance of Gandhi for our world today. So the book is Gandhi's Legacy. What is Gandhi's legacy? What is Gandhi's relevance for the 21st century? Why have so many of us forgotten about Gandhi? And then those who have not forgotten about Gandhi, they distort his message. They distort his relevance. They turn him into a saint. And a saint cannot help us. Only human beings help us. We have to demythologize Gandhi. We have to go back to Gandhi as a human being. Gandhi that was not a perfect human being. Gandhi that had flaws. Gandhi that made mistakes. Gandhi that had to correct his own views. But this is precisely the Gandhi who's of the most interest to us. And this is the Gandhi from which there is much to learn. In my book, I divided my writings into 4 different parts. I will tell you what these parts are and then briefly about each of the parts. The first part is called violence. The second part is called dialogue. The third part is called purification. And the last part is called the sacred. So violence, dialogue, purification, and the sacred. The reason that I decided to divide the book in that way is because I wanted to capture Gandhi's concept of satyagraha, where he talks about 3 elements of satyagraha: nonviolence, love, and truth with a capital T. So the first part deals with violence and nonviolence. The second part, dialogue, deals with love. And the third part, purification, deals with preparation for truth, preparation for living with the truth. The last part, the sacred, deals with those difficult conflicts like World War II, like war in former Yugoslavia, that provide the ultimate test for Gandhi's theory. So let me speak about each of the parts slowly for a few minutes. The part on violence is divided into 3 subsections. The first question that I deal with is violence necessary? Is violence necessary? Do we have to use violence? Gandhi's great merit is that he showed us that violence is not necessary, that it is possible to resolve human problems without violence. He was the greatest champion of nonviolence that the history of the human race has ever known. So there's a conclusive answer to the first question. Is violence necessary? And the answer is no, it is not necessary. The second question is more difficult. Is violence ever justified? So we don't have to use violence, but maybe sometimes it's justified to use violence. Many who teach Gandhi, many who think they know about Gandhi, are inclined to say that in Gandhi's mind, violence is never justified. And yet, when we look at the historical Gandhi, when we study his life, we see that cases violence can be justified. What kind of cases? Well, there's a famous case when Gandhi claimed that if we are not violent because we are afraid, then it's better and more honest to be violent. Right? So we cannot resort to nonviolence because of our fear, because of cowardice. Violence, to be nonviolent means to be courageous, to be brave, to act from the position of strength, not from the position of weakness. The attackers are armed, and there were several of them, and he didn't know what to do. Of course, he was not pleased with the situation, but being alone, being unarmed, he simply stood and watched the tragedy of his family. Gandhi thought that what was violated in this case was the dignity of humanity, the dignity of the women who were raped, and the dignity of man whose wife and daughters those were. And Gandhi thought that human dignity is of higher value than human life. Human dignity is of higher value than human life. We have to die one way or another, sooner or later, but our dignity we have to preserve by all means. So Gandhi said that this man, whose wife and daughters were raped by a group of people, should have done everything in his power to protect them and to protect their honor. And if that meant being violent, then it would have been better to be violent than to stand and watch and do nothing. So, of course, most of us practical people would say, yes, but in that case, this man would have been killed. Gandhi said, it is better to be killed, it is better to die for just cause than to allow such humiliation to take place. So there we have a case where Gandhi clearly thought that violence may be justified. It is one of the rare cases. He did not want to say thereby that violence is something good. Remember, the situation is constructed in such a way that the choice is between two evils, the women being raped or the man sacrificing his life to try to protect the dignity of these women. So the choice is between two evils. And Gandhi thought that the lesser of the two evils is to fight and to protect these innocent women, defenseless women, than to stand and watch. But those were isolated cases. In most other cases, in a vast majority of other cases, of course, Gandhi would champion nonviolence because he believed that almost always, in almost every kind of situation, there is an alternative to violence. We could do better than be violent. So what can we do? Well, in the second part, that's called dialogue, I'm trying to elaborate the beginning of Gandhi's answer. What usually happens in a case of violence is not only that there's a conflict between people, but there's a separation of people. In a case of violence, we treat each other as if we are objects, not human beings, as if we are dead things. We think of ourselves as something totally separated, as different. Our enemies are something horrible, and we are something good. Enemies are someone we don't want to talk to. There's nothing to talk to about with our enemies. Gandhi thought that this is a wrong strategy. With every human being, we should attempt a dialogue. With every human being who differs from us in his or her opinion. Gandhi even wrote 2 letters to Adolf Hitler. To Adolf Hitler. And he addressed those letters as dear friend. Dear friend. Of course, we all know that, or so we believe, the majority of us, that Adolf Hitler was one of the greatest monsters in the history of human race. Why is Gandhi calling him a friend? How dare Gandhi address him as a friend? Well, Gandhi's idea is that, and I think a revolutionary idea, that when we are confronting violence, what we are fighting against is not a person perpetrating violence, but violence itself. In other words, what we have to confront is not a person, but a problem. Problem. We have to come to the root of the problem. And simply by attacking the person, we can just add more violence to already existing violence. So we have to come to a dialogue with the problem, with the circumstances that create the problem. And Hitler is part of the circumstances. So we have to find a way to talk to Hitler, just as Gandhi found a way when he was still in South Africa to talk to General Smuts, or when he was in India, back in India, always to inform the Viceroy of India, whoever happened to be the Viceroy, about him preparing the Salt March or preparing a nonviolent movement of some kind or another. So for Gandhi to show love, the first element, the first step of showing love is to try to engage in a dialogue, to make that other person listen, and perhaps even more importantly, for us to try to understand our enemies, to listen to our enemies, to listen what is causing them to create that violence. In our world, we don't have enough listening. We are not good listeners. We are not patient enough, which is one of the reasons why Gandhi always talked about how satyagraha is like a feminine virtue. It's more feminine than masculine. We men, we want to fight by using our fists or by using knives or by using guns. Women are more patient. Women are more caring. Women are more loving. Women are better listeners. Women can hear the pain of a violent person. Women can see that the violent person is not necessarily a monster, but somebody who's a sick man, somebody who does not need punishment, but somebody who has to be healed himself. So this is what this dialogue is about. How to learn to listen, how to learn to talk to our enemies, how to learn to find a common ground with our enemies, a common language with our enemies. And Gandhi thought if we can establish a dialogue, about 3/4 of all of our problems would disappear. We would be able to solve them in a fairly easy, non-violent manner. That's the second part. The third part talks about purification. Why purification? Well, even Gandhi, who approached every person with love and without hatred, even Gandhi could not convert every enemy into his friend. In England, it was Winston Churchill, who we know intensely hated Gandhi and the Congress and India. In India itself, it was Jinnah who did not want to talk to Gandhi, who did not want to have a dialogue with Gandhi and find a solution for India to stay one. Jinnah insisted, as you know better than I do, on the separation of the Muslim from the Hindus, which led to the creation of two more countries. Well, first one, Pakistan, and then later on another country, which led to the bloody partition of India, one of the most shameful periods in the history of India. So, with some people, it seems very difficult, if not impossible, to establish a dialogue. When that happens, that we cannot establish a dialogue, despite our goodwill, despite our good intention, despite our willingness to listen the pain of others, despite our willingness to compromise, that Gandhi thought the two solutions, one good and one bad. One bad solution, which most of us choose, is to accuse our opponent of being evil, of being guilty, of obstructing peace. Most of us go that way. If we cannot solve the problem, then there must be somebody else who's responsible for that problem. Gandhi took a different approach. The only approach he thought is justified and nonviolent. Gandhi said, if my attempt to establish a dialogue with somebody fails, that means that I'm not pure enough, that my heart is not pure enough, and that my opponents cannot feel that I do not want to harm them, that I do not want a solution that is bad for them, that I'm trying to find a solution that is good for both sides. So, as we know, Gandhi lived a very simple life, a life of many renunciation and denunciation. Gandhi lived a life that was almost a life of an ascetic. Gandhi, of course, was a vegetarian. Gandhi, of course, practiced celibacy. Gandhi, of course, was restraining from allowing the pleasures to his senses, like spicy food or different kinds of things that most of us take for granted, that most of us enjoy, if not every day, then regularly. Why did Gandhi do that? Why did Gandhi spend pretty much all of his adult life trying to simplify his life, trying to live in truth and purity? Why is purity so important to Gandhi? Well, you Indians, I think, would understand that better than Westerners do. Uh, Gandhi thought not necessarily that our senses and our bodies are evil, but that they distract us, they take us away from what is the most important in life, and that is our spiritual orientation and our devotion to God, which for Gandhi was the same as the truth with the capital T. So the problem with the senses is not that they are evil. The problem with the senses is they preoccupy us and demand more pleasure and even more pleasure, and they distract us. They take us our attention away and our energy away from what should be the main focus of life. And that main focus of life is that we become spiritual beings, that we become as pure as we can be, so that in that purity, in that complete purity, and without selfish motives, we can approach every enemy and we can approach every problem. Then and only then can we really hope to solve our most difficult problems, the most difficult problems that violence and war pose to us. So this accounts, I think, according to my best understanding, to what Gandhi was trying to do. As you know, many of Gandhi's critics thought that that's not good enough. That's still not good enough. Because how would that stop Hitler? How would that stop a bloody murderer who's determined to have his way no matter what? Can Gandhi give us any recipe to stop people like Hitler? This is a very difficult question. This is not a question that's easy to answer. I think Gandhi had several layers of answer. One is that, again, we should not regard Hitler or anybody else as a monster. Hitler was an unfortunate and sick human being. Hitler needed help. What's also important to remember is that Hitler did not fall down from the sky. Hitler was a human being who grew up in Europe at a particular time, the time of unrest, the time of superficial peace after World War I, and that Hitler was the product of his own society and his own time. Hitler is like a headache, and if we eliminate Hitler, if we kill Hitler, then we don't feel the pain anymore. Gandhi said that's not good enough. That's an artificial solution. Yes, we do not need the pain, but we did not remove or address or even attempt to find the cause of the headache, the cause of the problem. We have simply removed the feeling of pain without addressing the problem itself. So just by removing Hitler, the best we can hope for is to go back to the equilibrium, to go back to the state of affairs that existed before Hitler. But if it's not Hitler, there will be another Hitler. There will be somebody else who would explode. There would be somebody else who would be the product of these circumstances, who would lead a war, an exploitation, and so on. So we really have not done anything but introduced more damage, more murder, more destruction by starting a war against Hitler, by bombing Germany, by destroying Germany, by dropping atomic bombs on Japan, and so on. If there's to be a solution, it's got to be a different solution. The two more elements that are very important, I think, for Gandhi. One is that the problems should not be treated only when they are out of control. That is to say, we have to start paying attention to people like Hitler, not when he's waging wars all over Europe and all over the world. We have to start thinking about Hitler before the crisis escalates. Once the crisis escalates, it's very difficult to do anything but just continue to be involved in cycle of violence. So it's important to address the issues on time. This is why Gandhi wrote these letters to Hitler in 1939 and 1940, before the war escalated. Of course, Hitler did not listen to Gandhi. Well, actually, to be honest, We know that the first letter did not even reach Hitler because the British censors stopped it and it stayed in India. For the second letter, we don't know if it ever reached Hitler or not. But some of us most likely would say, well, Gandhi's letter is very touching and moving, but it wouldn't stop somebody like Hitler. Then what? What would we do if Hitler comes with his soldiers and occupies India? Gandhi said, we have a plan for that too. We are not going to be helpless. We are not going to let Hitler do whatever he wants to do with our country. Hitler can control India, just like the British can control India, only if the Indians themselves allow them to control India. But we don't have to allow them to control India. So Gandhi wrote in this letter to Hitler, in his second letter to Hitler, that if somebody like Hitler comes to occupy India, that he and his friends and his collaborators would organize resistance to Hitler and his army in every single village of India. So he said, we will fight against you, fight by our own weapons. That does not cost any money, that does not spill any blood, that does not create more hatred, the weapon of nonviolence. And we know that to be involved in war, there will be a lot of blood. But Gandhi said, let it be our blood. We are not going to spill the blood of German soldiers. We are going to sacrifice our own blood. And sooner or later, just like the British could not ultimately conquer united India, determined to resist by nonviolent means, no Germany and no other force on earth could conquer India or any other fully organized, non-violently organized resisting country either. There is no way to conquer 600,000 villages or 800,000 villages. Yes, there will be many sacrifices, but at the end, we will win. At the end, justice has to prevail. At the end, human goodness has to prevail. So, what then is the message that Gandhi is trying to leave us with? What is the most important thing that we should take away from Gandhi? I think that the most important thing, besides those that everybody and truth, is our faith in humanity, is our faith that if we ourselves are unselfish, pure, kind, and loving, that there must be a way to touch the heart of another human being. Every human being, no matter who he or she is, no matter where he or she grew up, no matter where he or she did and how he or she behaved in his life, every human being has a good core in himself or herself. There's goodness in all of us. Unfortunately, we live in a world that does not stimulate that goodness. On the contrary, it stimulates the worst in us. It stimulates our senses. It stimulates our consumerism. It stimulates our materialism. It stimulates our disrespect of others and insensitivity towards others so that we can satisfy our selfish needs. But Gandhi says this does not have to be so. We can reorient ourselves, and slowly, one by one, we can reorient the world toward goodness, not toward evil, toward helping others and treating others as brothers and sisters, not toward behaving in a selfish way that we do now. The whole Gandhi's legacy depends on this one article of faith. There is goodness in every human heart. And if we don't reach it, it's because we don't know how to do it, or because we have not tried hard enough. So Gandhi's legacy is make yourself better in order to make the world better. Make yourself nonviolent. Make yourself pure. Make yourself kind. Make yourself loving. And this world would be better for all of us. There are many of us, especially, you know, that in India, millions and billions of us. But Gandhi said, this Mother Nature has provided for all of us. There's enough room for all of us if we can just learn the way of kindness, of love, and of nonviolence. Thank you for your attention.